Hitler's reign and eventual execution of the Jewish population is one of the most wide-scale examples of oppression. Hitler's reign began on January 30th, 1933, and it didn't take long for him to take the first steps to eradicating the Jews and other minorities that he deemed inferior. So how were the victims oppressed during the Holocaust? Over the years of 1933 to 1938, there were over 400 anti-Semitic and discriminatory laws put in place. It began with smaller rights being taken away, like the right to have a business, but it quickly changed to moving Jews into ghettos and concentration camps. Although we know now about Hitler's final solution, he didn't immediately start killing off people he thought were inferior. Getting the general public on his side were some of his first steps. He began to convince and brainwash non-Jewish German citizens that the Jews were bad for the economy, and that everything wrong with their country was their fault. During this time, the Jews were depicted as fat, symbolizing that they had ample food, and that they were rich bank owners who were stealing money from innocent citizens. Other images called the Jews ugly and hunchback with large noses. These images were made into political cartoons, posters, put in newspapers, and even made into children's books. Sooner or later, the non-Jewish German population believed that the Jews were the source of the problem. To put it into perspective, Hitler was seen as a savior from their broken country when he came into power. Germany had countless power struggles before Hitler's reign, and they wanted someone new, who was really passionate about their country, which he delivered in his campaign speeches. Keeping this in mind, it isn't all that surprising that millions of non-Jewish people began to personally discriminate against Jews. Once the Germans were essentially brainwashed to think that all Jewish people are an embarrassment to society, it was much easier and understandable for Hitler to roll out the active discrimination and persecution of the Jewish people. Although it's often misconceived, there are many other minorities that were persecuted along with the Jews. These minorities included homosexuals, gypsies, the mentally and physically disabled, and descendants. Beginning in 1933, one of the first steps that Hitler took to oppress the Jews was to open the first concentration camp in Dachau on March 22, 1933. On April 1, 1933, the Nazis staged a boycott of Jewish shops and businesses. Throughout the rest of 1933, people with genetic defects were sterilized. Jews were excluded from the arts, and they were no longer able to own land. One of the final acts of the Nazis in this year was on November 24th, in which they passed a law against dangerous criminals, which allows beggars, the homeless, alcoholics, and the unemployed to be sent to concentration camps. All of these actions were ways that Hitler was limiting the Jews' human rights, which is just the beginning of the horror that was yet.
You would find signs in stores, Jews not wanted here. The way to Jerusalem does not lead through this store.
The Nazis appointed someone to oversee my father's business. In German they called it an Abwickler. That man sat in my father's office. I see him to this very day. The monies that were due him were actually stolen on behalf of the German government, the Nazi party. And slowly but surely my father's business was choked more and more until more or less towards the end there was very little left of it.
Continuing in January of 1934, Germans took away the right to be on the German front line. Then later in May, they were not allowed national health insurance. Hitler's power only grew when the president of Germany, von Hindenburg, died on August 2, 1934. Later that month, Hitler abolished the office of president and declared himself Führer in addition to his role as chancellor. Essentially, Hitler was now a full-fledged dictator. The next year, 1935, one of the most wide-scale laws yet was put into place. On September 15, 1935, the Nuremberg Laws were enacted, which declared at the Nazi Party yearly assembly in Nuremberg, 1935, denoted a heightening in the oppression of the Jews. The laws excluded German Jews from Reich citizenship and prohibited them from marrying or having sexual relations with persons of German or related blood. The Nuremberg Laws, as they became known, did not define a Jew as someone with particular religious beliefs. Instead, anyone who had 3 or 4 Jewish grandparents were defined as a Jew, regardless of whether that individual identified himself or herself as a Jew or belonged to the Jewish religious community. Many Germans who had not practiced Judaism for years found themselves caught in the grip of Nazi terror. The Germans also tried to Aryanize businesses by letting go Jewish workers and businesses that were taken over by non-Jewish owners. The Reich citizenship law was a part of the Nuremberg laws, announcing that solitary Aryans were Reich's residents. As Jews were considered non-Aryan, this law stripped Jews of their German citizenship and made them stateless in their own nation. In the years 1935 to 1936, there was a great deal of things Jews were not permitted to do or possess. For example, the Jews were never again permitted to cast a ballot, the advantage installments to enormous Jewish families halted. They were prohibited from parks, eateries, and pools, as well as and losing German citizenship. Jews were forced to utilize the German greeting, Hail Hitler, and Jews never again permitted electrical, optical gear, bikes, typewriters, or records, international IDs for Jews to travel abroad confined, and numerous Jewish understudies expelled from German schools and colleges.
עם העסק הזה, עם המספר הזה על היד, מאותו רגע אני לא בן אדם, אני רק אין לי שם, אין לי כלום.
The oppression continued into 1938 with the Evian Conference, which was a meeting held with representatives from various countries. They discussed options for setting Jewish refugees fleeing Nazi Germany as immigrants elsewhere in Europe, the Americas, Asia, and Australia. The United States and most other countries, however, were unwilling to ease the immigration restrictions, so most of the Jews were still unable to escape. Kristallnacht, meaning Crystal Night in German, was the terrorizing nights of November 9th through the 10th. The Nazis were ordered not to kill Jews or other targeted minorities, but to destroy their property and essentially their lives, while capturing men for concentration camps and hard labor. Over the 3-day period, there were 200 synagogues destroyed, 7,500 Jewish shops looted, and not to mention the 30,000 male Jews sent to concentration camps, mostly in Dachau and Buchenwald. The following year, after Kristallnacht, the German government openly promoted dozens of laws designed to deprive Jews of their property and of their means of livelihood, even as the intensification of government persecution sought to force the Jews from public life and force their immigration from the country. One of those laws was having to wear the Star of David on your clothing to identify someone as a Jew. The Star of David was used to label Jews and further oppress them, isolating the Jews in society. Although the Holocaust is commonly thought of as the Jewish people being persecuted, they were not the only people targeted during this time. Beginning in 1939 and continuing until the end of the war in 1945, about 300,000 psychiatric patients were forcefully euthanized. These terrible acts were carried out among hospitals in Austria, Germany, Poland, and current-day Czech Republic. Half of the patients were killed were taken from church-run asylums. The program was authorized by Hitler, but these horribly forced deaths have now been seen as murders in Germany. It is estimated that 200,000 people were killed in Austria and Germany, and that the other 100,000 were killed all around countries in Europe under Hitler's influence. It's estimated 1,000 children under 17 were killed in the institutions of Ansbach and Gögging, Austria alone. It is believed that these killings played a key role in developments leading to the Holocaust. These are just some of the examples of the persecution that the Jewish and other minorities went through during the Holocaust. It's hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes when talking about the Holocaust, but in a poem, The Little Boy with His Hands Up by Yala Corwin describes how the boy probably felt during the time. Poems and other works like these shows the importance of knowing how others felt and how minorities have been treated in the past, so we can avoid the terrible actions in the future. Oppression is the first step in a genocide and can come as a huge warning sign to the possible actions ahead.